Welcome to this week's edition of Outdoors Online, a weekly webcast produced by the North Dakota Game and Fish Department. I'm your host, Tom Jensen. My guest this week is Russ Kinzler. Russ is a fisheries biologist stationed in Riverdale, works primarily with the salmon program at Lake Sakakawea. Russ, let's talk first of all about a little background on the salmon program, how we got it started here in North Dakota and why.
Okay. Salmon were originally stocked in the early 70s. They started out with coho salmon, which is a silver salmon. And then in 1976, they went to Chinook salmon, which is the king salmon. And basically since the early 80s, it has been strictly the Chinook salmon that have been stocked in the lake. They did it because Lake Sakakawea is a fairly deep lake and it has cold water in it. And there isn't a lot of fish that utilize that cold water, so to take advantage of that cold water, they started stocking the salmon to just utilize that space and provide an additional fishing, something to fish for the fishermen.
Sure. Each year you and your crews go out and collect salmon eggs to rear in the hatchery. Tell me how you go about doing this and how you get the eggs.
Okay, we use what's called an electro fishing boat. And what it is it's a boat with a generator on it, and it puts an electric current in the water. The current stuns the fish, and then they float up to the surface, and we're able to dip them up and put them in the boat in a live well. And then we take them to shore and put them in a transport truck and haul them to the hatchery where we spawn them.
All right, then what happens after you spawn them?
Okay, we spawn the fish in the hatchery, and then the hatchery personnel take the eggs, and then they incubate the eggs and hatch them there and raise them up to the size we want to be stocked the following spring in the lake.
All right. The reason you do this is there's no natural reproduction in Lake Sakakawea.
Right, yeah. Salmon don't have the flowing streams and stuff they would in their natural native range. So in order to maintain salmon in the lake, we have to spawn them and stock them, or they would just disappear in a matter of 4 or 5 years.
Your salmon spawning effort is complete for the year. The results weren't exactly what you were expecting.
Yeah, we were hoping for a little better spawning run. We knew that the 2-year classes of females that were going to be coming back weren't real strong. So we did fall short of our egg collection goal, but we feel we have enough eggs to still stock a decent stocking in the lake.
Sure. Do you have any idea why the egg take was so low?
Well, like I said, the year classes that with the females were coming back weren't as strong, and that just has to do with, not the forage out there when we stocked them that they needed, or maybe they were eaten by predators. I mean, there's a lot of things that can go into, or that can happen to a small salmon when it's put in the lake. For them,
sure.
It takes a little bit of luck for them to survive to get mature size.
So basically this means that you're going to have fewer salmon to stock in Lake Sakakawea next year.
Yeah, we are. With the eggs that we got, we're going to stock considerably less than we stocked last year, but it should be just a little bit less than what we have been doing the last 4 or 5 years prior to that. But the smaller stocking doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to have a good year class come off that.
Explain that.
In 2009, we stocked 50,000 fish in the spring, and that was the bulk of the salmon catch that was happening in 2012, which, as you remember, was a pretty good year of fishing.
Mm-hmm.
So a smaller stocking can still produce a good year class.
All right, there is some good news in all of this, though, and that the size of the salmon, the females, was bigger, substantially bigger.
It was. The females were the largest I've seen, and probably the largest on history, for Lake Sakakawea. They averaged about 11 pounds this year. The males were also larger, considering that the bulk of the males were 1-year-old fish and they averaged about 5 pounds. That's a really big 1-year-old fish for Lake Sakakawea. So when you look at that, fishing for next year and the next 2 years looks to be really good with some nice sized fish out there.
Do we attribute the size to the forage base?
It is entirely attributed to the forage base, yeah. There's a strong year class of smelt that's out there right now, and with those fish being able to feed on that large year class of smelt, it's creating some really nice sized salmon.
All right, Russ, thanks.
Thank you.
Even though firearms deer season is over, there are still plenty of hunting opportunities in the state right now. Waterfowl seasons remain open and there are still huntable numbers of birds in the state. There are also plenty of upland game opportunities, including some of the state's national wildlife refuges. Here are the 10 refuges that are open. They are Arrowwood, Audubon, Des Lacs, J. Clark Sawyer, Lake Alice, Lake Zoll, Long Lake, Lostwood, Tewakan, and Upper Souris. Remember that portions of these refuges could be closed to public hunting, so make sure you check for signs before you do enter the property. And also be aware that non-toxic shot is required whenever you hunt on a refuge. The refuges are managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so if you have questions, call the refuge office before you go. The upland bird seasons on the refuges open November 23rd and close on January 3rd. For Russ Kinzler and the rest of the staff here at North Dakota Game and Fish, thanks for joining us for Outdoors Online. We'll see you again next week.